Marhaba, shalom, and welcome to ROPESCAST, the independent voice of the Middle East. I'm Ibrahim Abu-Ahmad.
And I'm Ksenia Svetlova. ROPES stands for the Regional Organization for Peace, Economics, and Security. We're a young organization that works to lay the groundwork for a post-conflict Middle East by connecting forward-thinking Israeli and Palestinian emerging leaders with the like-minded peers across the region. We share a holistic vision for the Middle East, where everyone has more to win from conflict resolution and integration than to lose. If you are looking for more information on ROPES, please visit our website, ropes.org.
Our very special guest for today is Amos Yadlin. He served as a fighter pilot for 33 years, ultimately becoming the deputy commander of the Israeli Air Force. He earned the rank of Major General, served as the commander of the IDF military colleges and the National Defense College, defense attaché to the United States, and the chief of the Military Intelligence Directorate. He was executive director to the Institute for National Security Studies, INSS, from 2011 to 2020-21. He is currently the president of the Mind Israel Consultancy. A lot of things to say about Amos Yadlin with a very rich background, Ksenia, and I'm very excited to have him. But, before he arrives and joins us today, I want to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in Israel at the moment with the protests that we're seeing. And you actually mentioned to me really interesting statistics that you saw this morning.
Well, yes, I can tell you that I was very worried when I saw the statistics. According to Russia Foundation's recent poll, some 54% of Israeli youth think about leaving the country. So I can tell you frankly that not only the youth, but I do see this kind of mood among my friends who think about their children's future, and they think, well, if this country is sliding to dictatorship, why stay? Because Israel, with all of these problems and conflicts, still could take pride for being a democratic country. If it will not be so anymore, will you send the children to the army? I had this conversation with one of my friends and so on. In general, I don't know how accurate is the statistics, but it feels that this is kind of a vibe in the Israeli society right now, yes.
But, seeing the protests in the past couple of weeks with these masses going and protesting and disrupting in the streets and really putting themselves at risks at times, it's a question whether or not we're at a point of despair, or we can actually look at it in the flip side of the coin as a positive thing, as that the people are still fighting for their home. And
glass is always half full or half empty. It depends on who is the person who takes a look.
So I guess without further ado, let's listen from our special guest Amos Yadlin, and hopefully we'll have some points from him about the future of Israel.
Absolutely, I think that with his rich background in both military, the world of academy and research, and also politics. Small disclaimer, I used to be in the Zionist Union faction during the campaign of 2015, when Amos Yadlin was supposed to be nominated for the Minister of Defense if we would win that elections. But of course, the future of Israel also would look very differently. Without no further ado, let's bring our guest. Hello, Amos, and welcome to the ROPESCAST.
It's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
It is a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you so very much. And unfortunately, I will have to start with an uneasy and even painful question. Are we sliding indeed to dictatorship?
It's very much depend on the definition of dictatorship. And what is interesting in what we see today in Israel, that there are different definitions for democracy, for the right narrative, for dictatorship. But as an objective political science expert, I can say that Israel is sliding into dictatorship. It is still very far away from it. But if the legislation that this coalition have planned, will implement it, and will go through the Knesset, and the Supreme Court will not veto it, it will be closer to the regimes that we have in Hungary or Poland. It is not yet Iran, it is not yet Russia Putin's, but it will be much different from what Israel have been in the last 75 years.
You know, very recently, about 160 Israeli pilots have declared that they will no longer volunteer for their reserve duty. You have a long and a very rich career in the IDF. What do you think about this drastic measure? I mean, we're talking here about an unprecedented event, am I right?
Absolutely, it's unprecedented, but it is not pilot yet. It is officers, Air Force officers, who are serving in the command and control main bunker of the IDF. There are hundreds of them. It is not yet paralyzing the level of readiness in the IAF, Israeli Air Force, but it is a new phenomena. And as we speak, and maybe tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, if there is a Knesset legislation, there may be also pilots in the same status, stopping from volunteering. It is not refusing, it is not a rebellion, they are not making another militia. They only said that under a government who is leading towards dictatorship, who violate the basic contract of the Israeli people with its government, they are not willing to serve anymore as volunteers.
Amos, I have to ask you about, this centrality of this issue, the defending of democracy in Israel. I mean, prior to this incident, Israeli society had many conflicts over whatnot, right and left, the future of the territories, Oslo Accords, disengagement. Why is it happening now? Because this is indeed, as my colleague Ibrahim mentioned, unprecedented, unraveled, and seems to be, something that might indeed, shake Israeli society to its core.
Yes, it is happening now because we never had a prime minister who was indicted, who was on his way to jail, that decided to stay. We had Olmert, who was indicted, but he was fair enough, and he understood that you cannot be a prime minister when you are dealing with your own innocence. And he went to the court to fight for his innocence. He haven't succeeded, but Netanyahu decided to stay. The day he decided to stay, he also decided to destroy first the police, then the Attorney General, and now the judicial system, each one in his stage when they dealt with his cases. And the fact that he won the election, and we have now a coalition that we never had before. Netanyahu always wanted somebody to his left that will moderate him, that he can cope with his rightist, ultra extreme. And he always had Ehud Barak, Tzipi Livni, others, Yair Lapid, others from the center that will balance him. In this case, he is the leftist in his government. And when he looks to the left, he don't see anybody. And to the right, there are two groups that helping him to destroy the Supreme Court from their own interest. The ultra-Orthodox want autonomy. They want to be judged only by the rabbi, according to the Bible. And the ultra-settlers want to have the possibility to have more settlements in the West Bank, collapse the PA, and take over the West Bank that they consider part of Israel. So three groups, ultra-Orthodox, ultra-right-wingers, and those who want to save Netanyahu from prison. We never had such a political array with 64 members of Knesset.
So you also served as the military attaché to the US, and you know the country really, really well. And I would like to ask you, when President Biden invites the president of Israel to the White House while the prime minister is shunned, what does that mean for the Israeli-US relations?
Yeah, it seems that we also, in this regard, we undergo through an unprecedented crisis.
We had crisis in the past with the US. You can remember the 1975 reassessment of Secretary of State Kissinger vis-a-vis the government of Prime Minister Rabin. We can remember the crisis in the early 90s between Bush 41 and Shamir about the $10 billion for guarantees to the immigrants from the Soviet Union. But this time, it is a crisis that was initiated in Jerusalem, not in Washington. When the prime minister presented his government, he has 4 objectives. Number 1, of course, is stopping Iran from becoming a nuclear power. Number 2 was an attempt to have a normalization with Saudi Arabia and extend the Israeli engagement with the Arab world. Number 3 was the cost of living. And number 4 was security, domestic security. So the judicial issue was not there. And he haven't spoke about the West Bank and what Smotrich will do in the West Bank. These 2 issues basically took all the oxygen from the room in the Israeli-American relation. Instead of going to Washington and discuss with President Biden that he desperately needs for solving or achieving a better result vis-a-vis Iran and bringing the Saudis to normalization, if he once gets the invitation to the Oval Office, they will discuss with him what is happening in the West Bank and how Israel is not keeping its commitment on a settlement freeze, on other issues, the disengagement from northern West Bank. And the second part of the conversation will be about Israeli and American values are going apart from each other, which is the judicial reform or judicial revolution. So there is a self-inflicted crisis that Netanyahu have done vis-a-vis President Biden. And it is an issue that basically taking the main important national security goals of Prime Minister Netanyahu as he defined them, takes them backward instead of forward.
Amos, in the recent article penned by Thomas Friedman, he warned that the damage to the relations caused by the judicial overhaul in Israel might be beyond a repair. I'm quoting from the article. Please outline for us what is at stake, like what will happen from now on in the UN Security Council, military aid, military trainings, and so on.
Yeah, the Israeli-American relation is based on 3 pillars. One pillar is common interest. Second pillar is common values. And the last one is trust. Trust between political leaders, trust between military leaders, trust between people. There are cracks in each one of the pillars. They are not collapsed. They are still strong. But what basically the president have said, I think in the conversation with Netanyahu this week, I'm sure it was conveyed to President Herzog, and to be sure that it will be heard, he also briefed Thomas Friedman, who was quickly to write an op-ed. So I don't think that there will be immediately damages to the Israeli-American relation. Biden is highly committed to Israel's security. He's the only president who gave Israel basically $4.8 billion, the 3.8 from the MOU, and another billion for Iron Dome, after the Iron Dome level of ammunition went down. So on security, there is wonderful cooperation, since we have common interest in the Middle East against ISIS, against Iran. There is an exchange of intelligence. The Americans are enjoying more than the Israelis. So I don't see that in this area there will be damage. However, there will not be a common strategy to advance what I already mentioned, how we stop Iran from reaching a nuclear bomb and how we bring the Saudis to join the normalization. It will be a political damage and not a military or defense damage.
Some people might say that Netanyahu is waiting for Trump.
I don't think so, because it will be very difficult for Trump to to bring the Saudis, because all the Democrats will be against it. There is a window of opportunity now that the Democrats may try to bring the Saudis on board, and the Republicans will support it. So waiting for Trump is pro-Israeli, no doubt about it, but he's very unpredictable. And there is some bad blood between Trump and Netanyahu because of development in the last year of his term. But I haven't answered you on a very important issue, which is the issue of the Security Council. Because Israel can live without the $3.8 billion a year. Israel almost $500 billion GDP, and we can allocate more for defense if the US will not assist us. We can even produce advanced weapons that the US is selling us with the vouchers that they are giving us. But there is one place that Israel cannot substitute the US, and this is in the UN Security Council. And Netanyahu have to be very, very careful that America will stop veto and anti-Israeli resolutions.
And so we've mentioned the U.S. And Saudi a couple of times, and especially definitely, this Israeli government highlighted it as one of its main goals. And my question is, do you see normalization happening between Riyadh and Jerusalem? I mean, the talk was by the end of the year, but the question is, do you see it even happening at all with this government or in general?
Very good question. If you asked me this question 6 months ago, I would have told you that there are so many obstacles, so many issues to solve that I can't see it happening. It's mostly a bargain or a deal between the US and Saudi Arabia. The Saudis are asking a high price for normalization with Israel. They're asking security guarantees, Article 5 level. They're asking for free trade zone. They're asking for advanced weapon, F-35 and other goodies. And they're asking for a nuclear program. A nuclear program not like the one that the UAE got, with a golden standard of inspection and without a local enrichment. The road from Jerusalem goes through Washington. And it's not only the four demands of the Saudis. I think the Palestinians will be present, with Saudis asking Jerusalem for concession on Palestinian issue. And there will be also a Chinese presence that the US will ask the Saudis to remove some Chinese presence in Saudi Arabia. So it seems like very difficult to reach an agreement. However, the three leaders in these three countries would welcome a Nobel Prize for Peace, and each of them needed. So Biden needed for his legacy, and Netanyahu needed for its domestic problems, and MBS will love to have Khashoggi behind him. So people are working as we speak in the three capitals to find innovative ideas how to solve this very complex problem.
We will soon celebrate 3 years to Abraham Accords, and the future seemed very bright 3 years ago when the UAE announced the readiness to formally establish ties with Israel, and then Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, and the list. And today, it seems that everything keeps changing. I mean, the accords are still standing, but how the declining status of Israel vis-a-vis the US can perhaps inflict damage on the accords and also take the advantage of Israel as a country that used to be the door opener in Washington.
I don't think that the door opening in Washington was the main force behind the Abrahamic Accord. The UAE don't need Israel to open doors in DC. The main force behind the Abrahamic Accord was, I think, two issues: common enemy, Iran, and even more cooperation with Israel on a future economy, on technology, Israel being a superpower in high tech, in agriculture, in medicine. And this stays still behind as the main factor. It haven't disappeared. I think the peace could have gone forward in a much higher pace without this government, without what is happening in the West Bank. But if it was 8 and we wanted to go to 10, instead it went down to 7 or freeze on 8. And I don't think that this is a U-turn.
And speaking of a future peace and looking at the local affairs and the extreme dangerous developments that we see on the Israeli-Palestinian front, we see further destabilization and escalation that is basically facilitated by this new Israeli government, the most extreme right-wing government we ever had. What is at stake for the future of the two-state solution? And what about the future and the survival chances of the Palestinian Authority or any future negotiations with the Palestinian people?
Okay, so first, you're absolutely right. It's the most right-wing government that we had in Israel. And in this government, there is two forces: the force of Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and some extremes in the Likud that basically want the PA to collapse. And they want to take over the PA and hoping that somehow the Palestinians will not be there. This is a messianic way. It is not realistic. The world will not let it happen. And the rest of the government, led by Netanyahu and Gallant, will try that this will not happen, and they are supported by IDF and the internal security Shin Bet. So it is a right-wing government, very extreme, and Smotrich, who is the finance minister and also a minister in the defense ministry that responsible to the territories, it's a huge challenge. On negotiation and two-state solution, you cannot blame this government because other governments that have tried to reach two-state solution failed. Even the center-left government of Barak, of Olmert, that gave the Palestinians a very generous proposals, and the Palestinians choose not to have two-state solution. So I don't think that this is a new development. If it was a problem, it is now even a bigger problem, but the blame is to share between the Palestinians and the Israelis alike.
Is there still a two-state solution?
if there are leadership on both sides that will understand that they have to bridge the gaps, and the gaps are huge on every parameter, on the borders, on Jerusalem, on refugees, on security, on the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state. There is a huge difference. Even if Ksenia, I will send you to the Mukata to have negotiation with Abu Mazen, I'm not sure you are bringing a peace contract. And if you will bring a peace contract, can Abu Mazen deliver? Is the Palestinians see him as a legitimate leader? Is Hamas joining? Is the diaspora joining? So the two-state solution need to be rethinked by, I guess, another generation. As Israelis, what we have to do is to keep it alive as an option. And this is the difference between the Israeli center and left and the Israeli right. The Israeli center and left want to keep the two-state solution to the day that the Palestinians will be willing to compromise. And what the right wing want, that even if the Palestinians will want to compromise, that the reality of two-state solution will not be there.
So we, you know that we at ROPES are working towards strengthening the position and working with the young professional leaders across the entire region, including the Palestinian young leadership. And my question to you is, what does need to happen, and what would you recommend to them? Because we are trying to keep the two-state solution alive, but how can what would you suggest to those young Palestinian leaders that want to keep this dream alive? What do they have to do in order to keep it alive within their territory?
First, I have to congratulate you for what you are doing. I think you are doing a great job, and you are doing an important job, and you are what you are doing can make the two nations live side by side peacefully. I do believe that the next generation is the future. We need a different leadership, both in Israel and in Palestine. And the next generation should find a new innovative way how to bridge the gaps. As we advance into the future, maybe territories will be less important. Maybe the cooperation on human issues, on water, on energy, on economic development can make a benefit for both sides, even if territory will be left behind. I think education should be changed in the Palestinian Authority. The way the Palestinians are educating their next generation is very counter-constructive to any future peace. And there are some elements in the Israeli society that we have to change the education. And if you concentrate on education and visioning a different way to bridge the gaps on the main parameters, and it can be done. It can be done on borders, on Jerusalem, on recognition, on security. We can find a way to reach a two-state solution. Unfortunately, not as long as the two leaderships that we have today have the power over these two nations.
Yes, Amos, so I was just thinking about your proposition to go to Mukata and to negotiate. So if it depends on me, I am there for the challenge. I think that only if you try, you can basically, find out in the end whether it's can be successful or not. But I do agree with you that the challenge right now is enormous because we are in the last days, month, I don't know how much we will still have of the Abu Mazen's leadership. And perhaps there were some chances that were missed out in the beginning of his reign since 2005. Was still on his inauguration in February 2005. And I remember very well the excitement in Israel that finally you have a moderate leader that perhaps will be capable to, together with the brave Israeli leadership, to bring this conflict into some kind of resolution. But Amos, I wanted to ask you also something else. No conversation with you, I believe so, cannot be completed without discussing Iran. And you mentioned it already. But I want to ask you today, when Iran seems to be a kind of regional flavor of the month in the Middle East, with the reconciliation going on, Saudi and UAE and Bahrain even vis-a-vis Iran and so on, does this new development threaten Israel or compromises its goal in the Middle Eastern sphere? How real is this reconciliation?
Ksenia, I will be surprised. Israel is not against reconciliation, and anything that take the stability of the Middle East up is positive to Israel. The Middle East was on the verge of a war. The Iranians were about to attack Saudi Arabia last fall. And the fact that there is no war is positive for all of us. I am not afraid that the Saudis and the Iranians will join forces against Israel. There are still two countries with different goals, with different interests, with different approach of regime, different even Islamic approach. And they are rivals. They cut the diplomatic relation in 2016 when the Saudis executed a Shia Ayatollah in Saudi Arabia, and the Iranians, like Iranians, they burned the Saudi embassy. And now the relations are back as diplomatic relation, but the competition between Iran and Saudi on leading the Muslim and the Arab, the Muslim world, and who will be the dominant force around the Persian Gulf or the Arabic Gulf is still there. So I don't think that this is a huge development that Israel should be worried about. Israel should be worried about the fact that Iran was never so close to the bomb. They are enriching to 60%. They have 5 or 6 sufficient quantity for 6 bombs. They are more active in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen. But to me, this is not the axis of resistance. This is the axis of misery. None of us want to live in Lebanon or Syria or Yemen and some parts of Iraq. And the historic struggle between the advanced forces in the Middle East and Iran that take us to the past, to a religious, clerical dictatorship, will continue. But hopefully, without going to war, it will be more of economic struggle, it will be more of struggle of ideas. And as I was not thinking that war is going to happen last year, I'm not thinking that the basic conflict between Iran and the other camps in the Middle East is gone.
And on that note, do you see potentially Iran or one of its proxies, mainly Hezbollah, taking advantage of the current situation and the fact that Israel is heavily focused on its domestic struggles?
I don't think that they will be so stupid to think that Israel is weak. I think the Islamic Jihad in Gaza, I've seen it. When Israel is called to the fight, the intelligence is the best, and the capability to act upon precise intelligence with precise weapon is there. The IDF is still very, very strong, and anyone who will think that he have an opportunity, I think will find out that he have done a big mistake. They all dreaming about igniting and getting to a war with all the fronts together, simultaneously. Hezbollah, Syria, Iran, the West Bank, Gaza. But I called it that this is a dream, but when it's come to be true, they want it to happen N-1. All the other front, but not mine. I'm not willing to expose myself to Israel military power. So what you saw when Islamic Jihad in Gaza was attacked, Hezbollah have done nothing, Iran have done nothing, the West Bank was quiet, even Hamas in Gaza have done nothing. So yes, it is, Israel has to be ready for multi-front attack, but I don't see them rushing. The Israeli deterrence is still very strong.
So, just a really question on the cooperation of Israel with Egypt and Jordan. The veteran partners of Israel in the peace process. Will we ever see a warm peace with these very, very important neighbors of Israel? You know, these are our first countries that made relations with Israel, but unfortunately, we're looking at the relations and their developments. It's a cold peace, unlike the ones that we see today. Can we see a change in this in the future?
Yeah, you know, the enemy of the good is the excellent. And we have a good relation with Egypt and Jordan. The peace with Egypt is holding for 45 years. This was a dream in 1978, that we will have peace so long and so stable. The Egyptians figure out that going to war is a bad idea. They have enough problems. And they haven't become Zionists. They don't like Israel, but they keep the peace. And as a matter of fact, we do have now a common enemy, which is ISIS in Sinai, that we are fighting against together. So is Jordan, that we have a lot of interest together. But the people in the street of Amman, they doesn't like Israel. If the Palestinian issue will be, I will not say solved, but advanced, and there will be more good relation with the Palestinians, I guess the benchmark that the UAE and Bahrain have made, the benchmark of a warm peace, the peace with the street, the peace with the businessman, the peace with the academia, and then we go from the good to the very good and to the excellent. But it is connected in the last 45 years with Egypt, and in the last 25 years with Jordan. It's connected to the Palestinian issue, and this is the only issue that can make this peace from a formal peace to a warm peace, people-to-people peace.
Amos, I would like to ask you the last question for this podcast, and I would like to wrap it up with coming back again to Israel's internal situation. So we just basically quoted at the beginning of the podcast from a poll from Rashi Fund that says that 54% of the Israeli youth think about leaving. What could you tell today, this incredible 54% of Israeli young men and women, that, you know, this number, personally, I think that it's more belongs to other countries that you mentioned in the Middle East, where people do not want to leave and they leave it. What you can tell them today to encourage them that future can be different from the today?
Ksenia, I haven't seen this poll. I'm not accepting the numbers. I have my kids here, I have my grandkids, I see the people around me. People are speaking on leaving because they want their voice to be heard. It's kind of a protest. It's not a real it's not a real intention, and of course, it's not realistic steps that they are taking. But it shows you the polarization among the two camps in Israel that were never so huge. And some of the center left, the liberal camp, already declared that this struggle is over. The right and the extreme part have won. I don't think so. And I think what we will see in the coming months, maybe next year, that this government will fail. Netanyahu somehow will have a plea bargain, and the moderate right and the center and the moderate left will continue to make Israel what it used to be until last January, a very strong country with a sense of mission, with a sense of unity, and most of the damage is reversible and will be corrected in the future.
Thank you very much, Amos. Thank you for your leadership, for your realistic view, and for participating in the ROPESCAST.
We appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Good
Shukran.
afternoon. Continue with your good job.
Will do, sir.
Excellent job.
Thank you, sir.
You've been listening to the ROPESCAST, the independent voice of the Middle East. Our guest today was Amos Yadlin, a former general in the Israeli Air Force military attaché to Washington, D.C., and the former head of the INSS Institute in Tel Aviv.
Our podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all quality podcast platforms. We are very grateful to all our listeners from the Middle East, Europe, and the US, and other parts of the world. You can support our work by small donations. More details on our website, ropes.org. We also invite you to follow us, ropes.org, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads to find out more about our work and with the emerging leaders of the Middle East. I'm Ibrahim Abu-Ahmad.
And I'm Ksenia Svetlova.
Shalom.
And salam.